Here we are. Let's see. Jump in on this thing.
The fireplace feels so nice.
It's roaring.
I know.
It's roaring. Let's make sure.
You did a good job setting that up.
All right. The
mics are in.
Mics are in. All right. That's good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good day. Good evening to all of you out there.
I'm going to mute this computer so we don't have double audio. We hopefully fixed the audio this time.
Yeah.
It should be coming through nice and clear.
The test run sounded good.
The test run did sound good. So, but that's the thing. We did the test run last time. The problem is you have
like 14 times.
When you play it back,
Mm-hmm.
you have to unplug the mic to hear it through the speaker.
That's right.
Because it's on a laptop.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, I was like, oh, cool, it's working. Great. Yeah. And then we did our live. And of course, I hadn't plugged it back in.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Look, there was a lot going on. The lighting, the fireplace,
yes.
a new setup. So, yeah,
yes.
It still went well, I think.
Well, you guys can let us know.
I know. So another day, another live stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's on the docket today?
So we released the lesson about assertive communication.
Okay.
After we did the different styles of communication lesson, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, I believe. And so we wanted to do a deep dive into assertive communication, which is the trailblazer style, right?
Yes, my favorite.
Yeah, I know, me too. And then we decided, okay, well, let's dive a little bit further with some examples on how to project strength and how to project confidence in your communication, which is tied into the assertiveness that you can exude with your social interactions and also public speaking, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So assertiveness. Yeah. And one of the things I think whenever we do these topics, it's good to just sort of define what we mean by it, because assertiveness. When I think of assertiveness, it's basically making your presence known, right?
Yeah.
Being sort of present in the room, and not being necessarily aggressive about it, right?
Right.
You're not being domineering.
Yes.
But you do want to, when you're being assertive, the point is you have an opinion, you have a position on the topic, whatever it is, and you're making your presence known.
Right. I love that definition. And it's about striking the balance between like being kind, but also getting respect from people and not being a pushover, not being overly, saccharine and too, I don't want to say too nice, but it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like always.
You're saying in terms of the balance.
In terms of the balance.
Yeah.
Being kind and respectful to get respected in return, but not overdoing it with,
Yeah, I mean, that is important.
Yes to everything or
with
whatever
the act of being assertive,
yeah.
you don't want to come across as domineering. So certainly you want to be respectful.
And kind.
Yeah. In your sort of stance.
Right.
Right? You take a stance.
Yeah.
And you stand by it. You stand your ground.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you're not going to respect other people's opinions.
Of course.
It doesn't mean that you're not going to listen to a counter argument. It simply means you stand by what you're saying.
Right.
And are going to make sure that other people understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So if we were to reference pop culture or just some of the archetypes that we see in film and television and the media at large, because we're watching Game of Thrones, I have to.
Yeah, we're a little behind.
Yeah, we're behind, but on purpose.
On purpose. But
we had a bunch of travel this summer, which was lovely, but we didn't get to see the season finale. So don't tell us what happened.
Don't even bring it up.
I know. But
yes.
anyway, so from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I can think of two people who are like pretty good at being assertive.
Yeah.
You're thinking of the same people?
I'm sure one of them is the same.
Okay.
Jon Snow.
Jon Snow.
Jon Snow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jon Snow does a really good job of standing his ground and not being a pushover, but not being aggressive. And then Daenerys, Stormborn.
Yeah, Daenerys is good. What do you think? I find that Daenerys sometimes
overdoes it.
Gets into the realm of domineering.
Yeah.
Only because occasionally when she basically her temper can get the best of her sometimes. And when it does, you go from assertive to, taking action on principle. Right. And not necessarily because it's the right decision.
Because it's the right decision. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So a really good example of Jon Snow being assertive.
Right.
That I can think of.
Okay.
We're on season 7 right now, which is the one before the final.
Are there 8 or 9 seasons?
8.
Are there really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
So, in any event, so Jon Snow is presenting to a room of his, people who are supporting him, his subjects.
As the King of the North.
As the King of the North.
Yeah.
And he's bringing up something. He basically says, I have to go away. And
basically leave all of his subjects.
Yeah, I have to leave all his subjects. I have to leave my kingdom.
When he was just elected.
When he was just, anointed.
Anointed
or
king.
Maybe it's elected, I don't know. Crowned.
Crowned, that's it.
Yeah, we're clearly not royalty.
It's crowned.
So anyways, he'd just been crowned.
Mm-hmm.
The group there is excited to have a king again. They haven't had a proper king in a long time. Right. The last one was killed off. So
solidarity.
Right. They want him around. And so, anyway, he says, guys, by the way, I actually have to take off now and go do something down south. And they get all upset. Right. Now, at this point, his sister, who they also respect and is a contender for ruling the North, his sister says, don't leave. Why are you doing this? And she says this publicly in front of all, his subjects. Right. And what I found really impressive with Jon Snow in that situation,
and it kind of undermines him, right? His authority.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's why I think why I find it impressive is a normal person would be very upset by that situation,
right? And lash out
Sansa, and
maybe.
say, maybe make it personal,
right?
And maybe try and undermine her, so that and then instead, what he does is simply says, I respect your opinion. I can see that you don't agree with me. Mm-hmm. However, in this situation, I feel very firmly that it needs to be this way.
Right.
Right. And he explains why. He explains why it's important. And he just stands his ground.
Right. And he also goes, I love that. Right. And he goes over his objectives. He's like, look, my goal is not to be king. I'm trying to do what's right. And I know that there's this impending threat, this looming, darkness coming, and we need to do something about it. Right. And I know what to do, so let me do this. Right?
Exactly. I'm the best man for the job.
Yeah.
This isn't about me. This is about basically the good of humanity, but certainly the kingdom.
And I think another thing that really resonates with us, with that character, is that he's not egotistical, right? He leaves his ego out of it. And I think that's the main distinction between Daenerys and he, which is what you were getting at. Right? She lets her emotions get the best of her at times.
Yep.
And that causes her to make poor decisions or maybe ruthless decisions. Mm-hmm. And Jon Snow doesn't let that happen. So with assertiveness, right, it's really a fine line between being kind of aggressive and being, strong and confident in your decisions and standing by it without overdoing it, so to speak, right? And not having the ego get in the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's helpful to think in antonyms. So if you're not assertive, you're submissive. Right? And so the opposite of assertive is someone who basically just listens to what everyone else says.
Says yes to everything, or a sycophant, or
basically doesn't make an effort to present their opinion.
Right. Like Littlefinger.
Well,
in a way.
Yeah, a little bit. But there's some even more sycophantic types in the show. Because Littlefinger is surreptitiously assertive.
Right, he's doing it behind the scenes, manipulative.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a real pushover.
Well, Reek.
Oh, I have a really good one. Because Reek is a good one. But
Theon turned into Reek.
What is it? There's what are they called? The Maester, the Grand Maester.
Oh, the Maesters. Okay, so that's a great example of groupthink.
Yeah. No, but that's not the one I'm talking the Grand Maester, the one that runs Red Keep for a while. The old guy.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Right? So this is a guy who...
Pycelle.
Master Pycelle. Maester Pycelle. And this is a guy who, hopefully for those of you who don't watch Game of Thrones, you can still appreciate this. Because I think the concepts apply broadly.
Yes.
So Maester Pycelle is this... he's supposed to be like a healer and the wise man. Right? And someone who would be assertive in that at least he has strong, learned opinions that he presents and is confident about.
Right. Using logic to
and his knowledge.
Right.
His experience, because he's an old guy. But instead, this guy basically does whatever he thinks will get the greatest, what is it? The greatest... I'm thinking of the word. Basically, he's trying to ingratiate himself constantly.
And currying the favor of like Cersei. And
yeah. Exactly. Whatever will garner him the greatest favor with whomever he serves.
Right.
So instead of asserting his opinion, if the person he's supposed to be advising says, I don't like that, then he'll say, oh, of course, yes, I don't like it either.
You're right.
Right? Instead of standing by and saying, well, you may not like it, but this is the right thing. He wouldn't do that. Instead, he'd just say, oh, you don't like it? Yeah, I actually don't like it either. It was crazy of me to even bring that up. Right?
Yes.
So that's the opposite of assertive.
Exactly.
Timid, submissive.
Yeah.
And those people, it doesn't make them bad people. It just... if you want, I think, to have... if you want to play a role in the world, if you want to feel like you have agency over your own life.
And assert yourself where, you believe you can make a difference.
Right. If you want to be able to do that, then you need to be assertive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So those are some examples from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I feel like the Marvel characters, too, really do a good job at being assertive.
Yeah.
Right? The Marvel superheroes. It just comes with the whole image, right?
Yeah, if you think about it, it's definitely a trait of a natural leader.
Yeah.
Or any leader, for that matter. It's a natural trait of a leader, I should say. It's an important trait of a leader.
Yeah.
Because a leader, by definition, is leading, right? And leading doesn't necessarily mean you're doing what is popular.
It's oftentimes not popular.
It can often be not popular.
Yeah.
But leading is sort of guiding people toward a course of action that's going to be the best one.
Right.
And oftentimes the best course of action isn't obvious.
Yeah.
Right? It's often the most popular course of action is the easiest one. It's not necessarily the best one. And so that leads to people sort of reverting to what's convenient, right? What's comfortable,
right?
And that prevents you from excelling and making progress.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned groupthink as well. I think assertiveness is an important antidote.
Exactly, it combats groupthink.
Right. Do you want to just recap what groupthink is?
So groupthink, it's this psychological phenomenon that where in a group we will go along with whatever the dominant, loudest, most confident, I'm putting that in quotes because it's not really confident, voice will say. So it's about conformity, and we all do this, like humans do this. So it's a matter of being aware of it so that we can actually stand up for what we believe and speak up in groups. So we have a lesson about that. Check it out. I can link it below. But essentially, it's about being aware that groupthink might happen, especially in groups where all the people are very similar. So you can think of maybe like a fraternity, club, fraternity, sorority.
Politics.
Anywhere where there's just friends
corporate
that are
settings, all
very
time.
Similar, corporate settings. It happens across all different settings and groups. But essentially, you want to be aware of it so that you can take action and say, no, I don't really agree with this, but let me tell you, another option instead.
And that would be assertive. That action of sort of being aware of groupthink and then proactively presenting your opinion in spite of that, what the crowd thinks, that would be assertive. You're asserting yourself, and it's important because if what you feel you really believe, the only way that you can ensure it at least is heard is by being assertive.
Right, and speaking up.
Right.
So, do we have something over there?
Let's see, Sergio. Oh, let's see. How can I not cross the fine line between being assertive and pushy?
Yeah, it's tough. I think one of the things is to be mindful of your tone. Strike that power tone, but don't. Again, it's a fine line, so it's one of these tricky things. Try the tone and then get the feedback from the person that you're talking to.
What do you mean by the tone?
The tone of your voice, right? So I think with aggressive, it tends to be a little bit like not cacophonous per se, but combative, right? A little bit like harsh, abrasive.
Right.
So the tone can be like jarring almost. And I think the person, especially if they're auditory, they'll be receptive to that, and then you might see that they're kind of taken aback. They're a little bit.
So you're saying use a softer tone.
Use a softer tone, but still powerful,
right,
if that makes sense. So the power tone that we can achieve is by sort of finding a little bit of a lower pitch in us, and to do that, you need to use your diaphragm. So breathing, but I think also getting the feedback from the people you're talking to.
Well, that's what I was going to say is I think a really important part of ensuring that you communicate yourself without being pushy is to make sure that the other person feels heard as well. And so you can present your opinion and stand by it, but also say, what are your thoughts on this? How do you feel about this? Do you disagree or agree? And by making the other person feel heard, you ensure that while you're still presenting your opinion in an assertive way, they still feel like they have some agency over the decision and so forth. And in an ideal outcome, what happens is, if you truly believe your position is correct, you end up convincing them that it is correct, and not in a pushy way, but simply because it makes sense. And the way you've presented it, particularly if you do it in a softer or more respectful tone.
Respectful, yeah.
I have no issue with the soft tone, to be honest. I find actually that people who are very persuasive speak softly because they don't need a loud voice
to be heard,
to be convincing, right? And so I have no issue with the soft tone personally.
I think we're talking, but think about pitch, right? So with uptalk, we're constantly rising at the end of a sentence or a comment when it should be lowering intonation. So with that, you're not really taken seriously. So I think there is, something to be said for the pitch, because if you're trying to be assertive, you can still be soft-spoken.
The pitch is different, and the pitch, I definitely agree. I think a lower pitch.
That's the power pitch.
Yeah.
That's your power tone. That's what we call it.
Right.
But I think
you don't want to sound squealy.
Right.
You don't want to sound.
Right.
Part of what that is.
You can be soft-spoken, though, I think. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think a deep, soft-spoken voice can be very convincing.
It's soothing, too.
Part of why the higher pitch isn't as convincing is I think it suggests that you're not breathing well, right? If you think about what pitch is, higher pitch means you're constraining your air more, which makes it, if you think about a whistle, if you're whistling, the wider your mouth is, the lower the tone is going to be. The narrower your mouth is, the higher pitch it's going to be. And so it's the same with speaking. If your tone is high, it suggests that your muscles are contracted and you're tense.
That's interesting, yeah.
And so that's why I think just naturally lower pitch and also just softer tone, for me at least, I find it more convincing, more compelling.
Yeah. So there's 3 types of, we have auditory, kinesthetic, and visual. And we all have these, we're all auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. But some people are more receptive to one. There's a dominant feature in that. So for example, you might be more auditory, like you might be more predisposed to sounds, and like I definitely feel that way, because like tones definitely affect me. We always say on here, it's not always what you say, but how you say it.
Very much so.
Right. So Think about what you're more predisposed to, auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. Kinesthetic has to do with like movement and body language.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I will say though, Cicero, right, was think about also your body language, right? Sometimes with aggressive body language, we're, making like
That's
sharp movements, or maybe have like a fist, not a relaxed sort of like upright position. So you want to maintain open body stance to be assertive, but pay attention to what your body's doing, because that will also indicate whether you're being aggressive, right?
Yeah, that's a great one.
So.
Yeah. And I think another way to sort of train yourself on this is to observe other people.
Yes.
When they're talking to you, when they're talking to others, even on film or in person, just sort of look at what they're doing and decide for yourself. Does that person look like they're being assertive or they're being pushing? It's one of those things, we're blessed to be humans and have some intuition about this.
Yeah.
And trust your gut, right? And so if you look and you see that person, that just feels pushy, I can't figure out why. Maybe spend a little more time figuring out why that looks pushy and what are they doing? Because the more aware you are, more observant you are of these little cues, and they can be small.
Yeah.
They can be small things. The more nuanced you can be in your own communication as well.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people watching can really help, and
yeah.
But thinking of it in a non-judgmental way,
exactly.
more so as an exercise, like you described.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's very much an observational and instructional process.
Yeah. It's an ethnographic experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have some more questions over there?
Oh no, I think he's.
Is that covered?
He's covered.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that I will say on that is language too, right? Instead of using like you language, like you did this, you did that, I'm not pleased with you, shift it to a more neutral, or even placing it on you, like the onus is on you.
Even better. Wow, you're just full of this. I love that one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you like that? Yeah.
Definitely, because
it helps, I think.
Absolutely. When you're being assertive, people often will assume that, particularly people who feel threatened, that you're doing so to forward your own interests, right?
So that push your agenda.
Push your own agenda. And what will reinforce that concern for them is if you do use a lot of you language.
Right.
If instead you're using we
or I,
us and the company or the organization,
our team,
right? If you the team, right? If you use this inclusive language, you demonstrate that you're taking this stance because it's best for everyone, not because it's best for yourself.
Right. It's not a self-interested endeavor. It's
right.
Not.
And I realized I was using the wrong pronouns. It'd be like I.
Yeah.
And my, right?
And we.
You want to. Well, no, I'm saying
you want to avoid.
You want to avoid like I and you. Basically, you want to avoid calling out singular and instead focus on the group, focus on the community.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that.
Yeah.
When you're apologizing or when you're taking blame for something, you want to use I, but that's a little bit different. But I think in that context, you can still be assertive, but say, look, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be an example.
Yeah.
But in this case,
with this assertiveness.
I agree that using sort of that more group communal language will reinforce the idea that your opinions are sort of.
They matter.
Well, they're targeted at ensuring
benefiting everyone.
The group's benefit. Yeah.
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 I think the last thing that we will say, let's talk about how assertiveness might vary across cultures.
Really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it definitely varies. I mean, the obvious one for me is that in Asia, being assertive can often be construed as being rude.
Rude and aggressive.
Yeah. But certainly rude if you're younger, right? So the expectation is that the older person, the more experienced person, is the one who
has the knowledge,
and is the one who should basically be calling all the shots. And if you're younger and less experienced, you should just be listening. And so assertiveness in those cultures is much more challenging to do tactfully than it is.
It can still be done, but
in, say, American culture, where assertiveness is rewarded and encouraged. And
even from a young age. I mean, even in school, I think in most schools they teach that, right? How to stand by your word, how to build a persuasive sort of argument.
And I think a lot of corporate situations in Asia struggle because of this dynamic. I do think the U.S. also, and Western cultures in general, struggle in the opposite, which is you sometimes have
like overly so.
Yeah, you have too many cats and no herders, right? So you have too many solo thinkers. Yeah, or wolves. But the point is, on the one side, you have a bunch of sheep, right, following one person. On the other extreme, you have a bunch of people who aren't going to cooperate because they're all trying to assert themselves. So there's no question.
Or be domineering.
Or be domineering. Right? But be domineering.
Maybe.
Right. Asserting themselves without taking into account other people's opinions.
And like they think they're asserting themselves.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So again, it comes down to that balance.
You got to find the middle ground and take into account the context, the cultural context. So if you're in an Asian society, you probably want to dial it back.
Exactly.
You can still be assertive, but I would do so in a much more reserved way.
There might be some hedging involved,
right?
There
might be some hedging. Yeah.
Weren't you saying to me the other day that no will not be taken for as an answer, right? If somebody is trying to, this is not necessarily related to assertiveness, but it still comes up as an example.
Very often.
Hedging.
Right.
Could you mind repeating it? Because was it? I forget the context.
So
sorry.
So basically, it's hard to get a no in Asia, but instead what you'll get is a maybe or even a yes.
Right.
But they're really saying no.
It's not a real yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think of hedging as basically giving people an out. And I think in this case, this is really about just not necessarily being able to say no, because it feels rude to say no. Right. So they'd rather say yes and give you an answer that isn't as direct.
Or just, not show up when they said that they would show up.
Right. And so I think that is tangentially related
It actually
to assertiveness.
Right. Because when you're saying no, you're also being assertive, right? I mean, it's not easy to do.
No one wants to hear no.
It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
You don't want to be rejected, and you don't want to be the one rejecting the person.
Yeah.
In terms of let's say they invite you somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think being able to assert yourself while also taking into account other people's opinions, right? So we've talked about it's important to hear other people's opinions. It's also okay to be convinced by them.
Yeah.
Just because you're being assertive doesn't mean you have to get your way.
No.
Right?
No.
You can be assertive, but if someone else comes up with a counter argument that sounds more sound or logical than yours or better thought out, then take it, then follow that and say, you know what, that's actually a really good point.
Right. I think a good leader is able to be swayed too.
Absolutely.
Right. And especially if it's grounded in sound logic, like you said.
Yeah. This isn't about winning. At the end of the day, being assertive is about sort of establishing what you think is important or correct and pushing for it.
Right.
And if someone else comes up with something that achieves that even better than what you're pushing for, by all means.
And you're not trying to placate people, right? It's really more of, standing your ground, but also thinking about the group, the benefit of everyone's benefit.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sort of sums it up. Time got away from us today.
As it always does.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow's Chinese New Year for those people celebrating.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. That's
Happy
right.
Chinese New Year.
I'm already wearing some red.
Yes, I have my red sweater somewhere.
I'm excited for that.
So it's the year of the rat. So happy year of the rat.
Which is my brother's year.
Yeah.
So we'll have to congratulate
him. New baby coming up.
The new baby too. Yeah. Lots of exciting things. So anyways, for those of you celebrating the Lunar New Year, it's not just China.
No, it's not just China. Asia. It's the Lunar New Year. Yeah.
That's right.
In calendars, it always writes Chinese New Year. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
that's the easiest way to write it.
Yeah. So I guess the proper
for those
way
of you on the lunar
it,
calendar.
So you're supposed to say Happy Lunar New Year?
Well, I don't know if there's any supposed to.
Oh, okay.
Right. I'm not one of those people that's obsessed with being too PC.
Yeah.
So in any event.
But you're still very respectful.
I try to be.
Yeah, you are. All right.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Well, thank you, everyone. Happy Explearning.
Have a great weekend. Happy Explearning.
Yes. Have a great week.
Thanks for joining. Yeah, we always love hearing from you during our shows and afterwards. And after. So, stay involved. Be heard. Be assertive.
Yeah.
And
speak up if there's a topic that you'd like us to cover. By all means, we love getting your feedback and your suggestions and ideas as well. So
the whole deal.
Let us know.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Happy Explearning, everyone.